Hello, welcome to our second lecture. After social network analytics and an introduction into social networks, today we will speak about human resources, human resource management, what human resources mean in this time of sustainable transformation. Human resources are key in this lecture now. And all research we have done in our group at TU Berlin at the Center for Entrepreneurship, and research that should be done, that's important, that covers most of how people should be managed, should be organized in a modern business world. When we go into history, we always have done some activities. I wouldn't call it business. I mean, first we were hunting, we were finding something for eating, for having food. Then settlement came. We were building houses, we were improving farming. Up to a time where we actually had an agricultural revolution just before the industrial revolution. And then we got into an industrial society. The speed of innovations, of business running, of really getting into the system we are now dramatically increased 300, 200, 150 years ago. First with a production of many products in mass, where we had a mass production to a market saturation last century. At the same time, foremost after the First and Second World War, a process of globalization started. Businesses were not concentrated on a regional market or national market, they were concentrated on international markets, and those international markets were expanding and expanding. And also technology kept abreast of time, so with this amount of research, development, innovations done at this time, a lot of knowledge was produced in research institutions, at companies and research and development departments. And we were heading in the 19th in a kind of 19th of the last century in a kind of knowledge-based economy, followed by many more startups came into place, new businesses took over. Also the great or large players nowadays with Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, were getting great at this time, were getting businesses at this time, and this time was considered to be a time of creative or creativity or creative economy. And now we are clearly heading in a time which changes dramatically all what we have developed the last thousands of years. We have a kind of sustainable transformation, which does not mean necessarily growth as a one-sided direction. So that means also changing a lot of things, not only products or our behavior, it also changes the kind of managing humans or how humans actually get into employment, how they develop themselves, how they are organized in companies from a startup to a corporate. And that's the topic what we are speaking about, or what we will speaking about today. And to organize humans, or even without organizing them, if you consider yourself, incentives are the key. Incentive structures. You do something because you are incentivized to do that. It can be incentivation from inside you, really want to know that, you want to learn it, you want to do that. It can be an external incentive. You get something for it. You have an advantage by doing that. So to organize humans is always a process of setting some incentives, and there are different dimensions of incentives, and we have to get into that because it's very important to understand that and to get it right when you're once in a position of organizing humans, or even when you start up as a startup team. You have to organize your work processes, and you have to make sure that you're still incentivized what you are doing, otherwise things will go wrong. The first dimension of incentives is, of course, a monetary one. People earn something for doing something. You value something with money, something that has been achieved. So most people get a monthly salary as a monetary incentive to do something. And they need this money for a living, most people. But incentive can also be team-based or individual-based. Do you give the entire team the same salary? Or do you pay it by certain team positions? Does a programmer get more money as a marketing specialist or as an engineer? So then it gets really complicated, and by getting into the team and not paying the same money can have advantages and disadvantages. Doing it individual based can have advantages and disadvantages. Then equally based or position based. Do all in your entire organization with the same position get the same amount of salary or the same incentive? Or do we really position based? That someone taking more responsibility might earn more money, might have more holiday days. So there are differences in incentivizing groups of people in the right way to get them really motivated to do something. And of course, process-based and outcome-based, particularly important for startups. Process-based means that you incentivize when actually going started. Every small step is just awarded by maybe monetary means, but maybe also by company shares, by holiday, whatever you can give. That's process-based. Or is it outcome-based? The product is developed, the company has a legal status, is started, or some yearly plan or things you want to achieve within 1 year is achieved, and you have an outcome that can be awarded or rewarded with whatever means. So you have very different ways of incentivizing people, very individually, as team, equally based, or in the process, or after something has been achieved. There are different kinds of incentives. As I said in the beginning, you can be externally incentivized by receiving money, by having more holiday, maybe by getting up in a hierarchy of a larger company, and that's labeled an intrinsic motivation. That comes from outside. You want to develop and you get offered this development by getting more money, by more holiday, or by a better position. Others is the intrinsic motivation. And I hope you all are intrinsic motivated somehow by being keen on learning something, because it's the intrinsic motivation. You want to know something, you want to understand something. Maybe also you want to build something, you want to produce something, you want to solve a problem. That are all intrinsic motivations coming out of yourself. That does not need an intrinsic stimulation. It comes out of yourself because I like it, I would like to solve it, I would like to do it. It's the intrinsic one. Many of the incentives are also mixed. You receive some money for doing something, but still you're very motivated to do that because you like it, you have fun, or you want to really go forward in fulfilling a passion you always had. That are the definitions here, and what we actually know is that extrinsic motivation has a marginal decreasing utility. That means if I give money to you, it helps you once by getting really motivated. It does help less as a second time, and. So you have to give you more and more money to achieving the same level of motivation. That's not true with intrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation has other disadvantages. For most, actually, monetary incentives have other disadvantages. That's the decreasing marginal effect I just mentioned. I have to give you more and more to achieve the same effect. But also, extrinsic motivated people or extrinsic motivation overrides intrinsic motivation. Maybe in the beginning, when you are entering a startup, you are still motivated by getting that running, but you are paid a lot of money. And after a year, you're not so much interested in that startup anymore, but you're interested in receiving the money. So actually, this external incentive is overriding the intrinsic incentivation. And it actually creates shortcut thinking. I mean, when you achieve something and you receive a monetary incentive or a monetary award after, then you might go in a shortcut to get the money as fast as possible and as easy as possible. So it does not really motivate getting deep into a problem or finding the best solution. It motivates you to find one solution for getting this monetary reward for what you are doing. In this way, And researchers agree that employees in more creative industries, like in entrepreneurship or in startups or in research development departments, are better motivated by intrinsic means than extrinsic means. Intrinsic means are more stable, also sustainable, and lead to the better results in comparison to extrinsic motivation, which does not mean that you shouldn't pay your workers. It means that it's better to have a battery of means for actually increasing intrinsic motivation of employees and not only working with extrinsic means. And we were taking that and in research we were actually going to a number of companies which were cooperating in a network and testing that at working teams there from very different levels on a hierarchy, for very different task assignments they did. You see that these companies, some of the companies you probably know, like you have SCA, you should know. That's a direct competitor of Procter & Gamble. It's a Swedish company. Beetle is a world market leader in air curtains. When you enter a department store, you feel that when you go inside, outside is cold, then you have a kind of air curtain, and then inside is warm, or the other way around, depending where you are. Reining is a transport company. SPIE is a Belgium construction company. So they all were somehow working together in one network, and we were just testing all the means how we could intrinsically motivate these people to work, to be creative, to solve problems, and we try to avoid external incentives. And I now go through the means we have used that are researched, and that's worth going on like that. And what does not mean that increasing payment or offering professional promotion or giving more vacation to people does not help. It really helps. Somehow it motivates actually intrinsically and extrinsically. But let's go through the means that really have been shown to motivate in an intrinsic way. The first is the social status. If you work in a larger company like SCA with 100,000 of employees, you are more motivated if you have a certain special position, if you do something which has a own name, which has a character, which you can sell outside, which something like a knowledge worker or problem solver or whatever. If you give a group of people or even single individuals a special status, whatever it is, and that gives them a special role, that already motivates intrinsically. You are something special. You are treated as an individual and you have an individual position. And that actually has a significant effect on the motivation of work. It doesn't cost anything. It's not an intrinsic motivation. It's not an extrinsic motivation. It's an intrinsic motivation, like knowledge worker. And you have to, of course, announce the importance of that position. Another thing is challenging and clear task. That's the difficult thing. But it has been researched. Maybe you know it yourself. You might feel very bored if a task or assignment you get as a student, it's too simple. If you have to do all the time the same and you have to learn by heart everything, it's nothing creative in it. It's not really motivating you. On the other hand side, some assignments might be so difficult that you start doing that and you realize, oh, no, I cannot do that. I cannot solve that. So it might be too challenging or too less challenging. Now there is clarity. I mean, of course, tasks have to be formulated in a very clear way. You have to understand that at the first glance what is meant and what you have to do. Many things are kept in the middle and a gray zone. So that makes it really difficult to motivate people solving problems or engaging in tasks when you cannot clearly formulate that. This one Hungarian psychologist I'm not trying to pronounce his name, but during the lecture you will see the name quite often, actually modeled it like that, that you have a kind of flow, a flow experience. What he describes is that you forget about thinking of yourself. You're not considering yourself, you're into a task. Maybe you know it from watching a movie or doing sport or doing other nice things, so that you forget about yourself and you're into the flow of things. And in this state, you're actually very high performing, as research shows. And when you actually can formulate a task that challenges are quite high, and it matches still your abilities, that's important, then you're actually in a state where work really is fun and it motivates you. So actually the level of challenge should actually meet directly your capabilities. And if you have a well-organized startup or organization, tasks should be distributed like that to motivate everyone up to a flow experience. And next is autonomy. Everyone knows that if you're monitored the whole time, if someone actually looks the entire day what you're doing, how you're doing things, and is controlling, evaluating all the times, it's annoying. It's not motivating, and it actually gives you a feeling of great distrust. Having this feeling does not motivate you. And research shows that it is actually intrinsically motivating when people trust you and give you a lot of autonomy in your work process. So that you determine yourself when and what you do at what time. Like maybe displayed here. You can be completely calm, you decide how you work, you decide your working times. I mean, many new companies apply that and say you can stay at home. Also COVID-19 showed that home office can work for some people, for others it doesn't. So there are differences. Some people like to be performing in the morning, some in the afternoon. Some like to do certain things at certain points in times. So actually by giving people and also entire work groups autonomy, you motivate people to perform better, to be more creative, to actually put more effort into that by actually being able to decide themselves. What you have seen now quite often is the name Amabile, Teresa Amabile. That's, when you ask me, the leading researcher globally on motivating, incentivizing employees on working conditions, and creativity and working conditions and startups. The next thing is, and that's a topic that has been widely discussed, it's the feature of teams. How do we assemble teams? How big has to be a team? How small has to be a team? I mean, we have studied it now for 70, 80 years. We actually don't have any solution. There is no real solution in assembling teams. I cannot say put these people together and it will be successful. Extremely difficult. It's also impossible to predict all this informal dynamics, relationship dynamics in teams. It's also very difficult to predict. So teams keep a mysterious thing. They are hard to organize, but you have to understand it. For most a startup, because teams are the factor where startups fail most. That's much more important than an idea or a business plan you have. Most startups actually fail because a team is breaking down, the people are not willing to work with each other anymore. So there are the problems. Also investors. Investors look first at the team, whether that team actually makes the impression of being strong enough to get through very difficult times. Of course, there are many methods and solutions to that. One is, for instance, what you also could label Tinder for founders, where people match to each other. Every big accelerator or incubator has that. We have it at TU Berlin together with other large universities in Berlin to match people to each other. And it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. It's no final solution of how to put together teams. Here you see a network where TU Berlin has a leading role. That's a network of European technological universities or universities of technology. Some of them have solutions, like we are just rebuilding it with other universities. So actually all universities, all incubators have solutions in teaming people, in matchmaking. However, it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. And as neither psychology nor sociology or business administration has a fully fledged answer when something fails and when something succeeds. So there is no explanation for that, but there are some models. One of the most famous models are the 6 thinking hats. That's theory of De Bono, going down to the fact that we have very different thinking styles. Just imagine an engineer looking for a very logical solution. The style of thinking, the style of problem solving is different to an artist which actually tries to get something done on emotions. So the whole approach towards solutions or challenges is different with different people. And De Bono classified 6 different thinking styles. You might have a look into that and might decide I'm rather that than that. I don't believe that that's fully distributes and you are only one thinking style, but the tendency is there. If I read it, I see a tendency for myself as well. Still, even if we put together people with different thinking styles, which is a theory behind it, you have a diversity of thinking styles and you have a group that is more able to solve problems than other groups. On paper it sounds nice, and in reality it doesn't work. And that's something you have to keep in mind. There are many, many models out of that, but there is no full solution. There's one half solution. What has been shown in larger research and development departments is a solution on speed dating. That people meet each other and after a few seconds you know I can go with this guy or not, I can work with this guy or not. And that's something which more and more is researched, which more and more is applied, but it's of course difficult. I mean, even at our university we have 35,000 students. We cannot make a matchmaking or a speed dating session with 35,000 students. So it's impossible. It's somehow practical impossible. But it is a solution. At least it leads to teams working better with each other than teams without that speed dating session. In reality, very seldom we will have a chance for doing that. But it gives us scientifically an explanation how it works. Fully explained, it cannot be fully explained, this phenomenon. I mean, we know that our mind works out some connections, some closeness to other people or thinking styles that we like, and we like to work with those people. That we know. But how that actually works in our brain and how that works in interaction with other people, we actually don't know. So there is no solution to the teaming question, but there's a lot of research still going on. One thing is clear that comes out of our own research. Conflict is actually positive. If you don't get on a personal base, but you have different opinions, you have argument, even a small conflict with others, it always helps and it is actually intrinsically motivating. As you know, I mean, you want to have right. I mean, you're investing time and you're investing energy to actually prove that you're right. Because you are convinced intrinsically out of yourself that you're right. So conflict actually in teams, as long as it doesn't go down to a personal level, is positive towards motivation, also towards creativity, towards problem solving. We also did research in groups over a longer period of time that shows that, I mean, you can imagine if you have to stay together in a research development team for several years. As a startup, normally you stay together for quite a long time. So you can imagine that friendship appears, even partnership appears or the other way around, that people in the beginning liked each other and something happened and the people don't speak to each other anymore. That all happens. But what we could show that actually friendship as such, and we defined it as you also do activities outside of the work context, works positive. So actually, the positive side of friendships, by trusting, exchanging information, not hiding information, has a more positive than negative effect in contrast to only shallow, friendly contacts. That's what the research actually clearly shows. We also could show that, and that's important, or has become important in COVID time, that you can actually organize virtual teams quite well, but you have to keep some conditions. And the difference is that fully virtual teams, you have to have a lot of asynchronous communication. You have the Zoom calls and you can see each other, of course. Still not the bandbreadth of signs you have when you compare to meet face to face, but you have the synchronous kind of communication, but you also have a lot of asynchronous communication. Most social online media are asynchronous, and it makes it more difficult to get that organized. What you have to take care of is the structure of work, actually, to have a lot of mutual dependencies, interfaces, that the people also have to get in contact. So if you do that, and if you give people once or twice the possibility to meet also face to face, organizing things completely virtual is possible, it has been shown, and it shouldn't be any problem for a startup, but also for other teams. And of course, we have gone through that in the first lecture, I think. A team needs to be supported, and every academic institution like ours has a center doing so. And our Center for Entrepreneurship actually supports you with whatever means to become or to survive difficult times as teams, and to be supported with whatever support you need. Also directing you towards sustainability, that as team you also fulfill a mission, that you are actually going for a passion. That's actually quite key in our action at our center. And then you see whatever you do, in what direction you go, what social development goals you seek, there are differences. When you go more for environmental sustainability, you need really experts to develop technology doing that, to gather enough biological, chemical knowledge and actually going for that. If you have a social mission, you need the entire breadth of support, from legal advice to trainings, coaching, also experts. So that you see differences, and teams can be helped throughout a difficult period. Teams are key for investors, and teams are really important for the startup success. And of course, coming to the last lecture on social networks, the embeddedness of teams in a network of other startups, of maybe business angels, of investors, of suppliers, of customers, it's really important, and you should take that very serious in positioning yourself as startup. So far, our startup teams, so far about teams. Internally the members count, but also the external positioning configuration counts a lot. Another very important mean for intrinsically motivating people is managerial encouragement. I mean, often managers have problems with that, but actually, you know it yourself. If you get a good grade or something, says you have done it very well and a brilliant solution or whatever. When someone actually says positive things about what you did, it actually motivates you. And team leaders or a CEO in a small company or someone as leading a startup team should do, and the members should do it towards each other. And what we have shown is a leader is not a leader. Also, when displaying it in networks, a leader can have very different position. A leader can be very central within the team, determining, dominating all processes, or standing between teams, or being the gatekeeper in a team to the outside world. So actually team leaders in startups or wherever can have very different positions, very central or very peripheral. And then the networks where leaders are in are very different. You have an informal, friendly friendship network talking about whatever instead of work. You have a managerial network where you talk about the organization of work, the work process, work decisions, work goals. You have a problem-solving network where you actually discuss about solving problems. That's the creative part of the work. And you have workflow, you have dependencies, interfaces among team members. And when you go into research, you actually see very different results. The optimum team leader in a small team, in a small startup team, should not be involved in problem solving. That's not his task. The optimal team leader is a gatekeeper, a boundary spanner, who actually takes the information from outside and brings them into the team. And for the other networks, a team leader should be aware what happens, but not being central. So in contrast to intuition, a team leader is more actually the one who guides the process by being externally very, very well informed and by being internally abreast of time but not dominating the process. That's also defined more or less in a theory about promoters. That's a German view on how teams distribute in roles. The American view on startup teams is more there's a champion and a champion is going for that. The German view is broader. You probably need more than a champion. You need someone being a technological gatekeeper or being enormously knowledgeable in technology, in engineering. You need someone driving that. That's maybe closest to the champion theory. You need experts, process, relationship promoters. So you need different roles in the teams before it won't work. That's also something which it's important to consider. Not only the team, but also a team has to be managed, or the team needs to have some leadership. Another important thing is instant feedback. And you know that's intrinsically motivating. If you write an examination and a few minutes later you have the grade, it can be demotivating, but if it is a good grade, it's motivating. If you do something and you have instantly a feedback, it's actually really motivating you, and that often is not really done, that you have an instant feedback of what you actually do, because you get the feedback when you long have forgotten what you did, so it doesn't have any intrinsic effect anymore. And that's research I have done years ago, but it's still research to be considered, the structure of communication. I mean, as many people see it, actually the creativity of what teams actually do is hidden in the structure of the communication within these teams. And there's actually agreement that this structure determines the functioning of teams, also startup teams. Here we have him again, the psychologist. And when you really look into that, you have structural features that can be actually serve as typology, like centralized frequency, segmentation, and you can apply them to the team structure as such. And if we go easily to a hypothesis, team creativity will be negatively related to the presence of a central team leader, just as we had. So that actually what we expect when the team leader is getting more dominant into the problem-solving process of the team, and actually the creativity will go down. The team leader is overloaded with information, this thick information, the individual autonomy is reduced. So there are many things that I just were mentioned throughout this lecture, put into a hypothesis, make us expecting a central team leader will be negative for the creativity of teams. The frequency of communication is the same. If you communicate too much, you get distracted, you block your creativity, you block actually also autonomy in this way. So actually it helps you for distributing the right information to the right time, but on the other hand side, it blocks you in actually booking creative results. So what we expect, inversely U-shaped relationship, there is an optimum. Somehow communicating enough, but not too much and not too less. And if we go here, also disagreement is, if you have disagreement, it helps you being more creative. If it gets too much, then it might be negative. It's also inversely U-shaped. And that's something in research not often done, that you not only look for the linearity of relationships, that you look also for the non-linearity of relationships. And as you can imagine, there's hardly any relationship which is endlessly linear. Almost all what we do is non-linear. Doing too much sport is not good. Doing not sport at all is not good. Eating too much is not good. Not eating anything is not good. You can go into many, many, many things which are not linear, but non-linear. And that's what is here addressed, and that you actually test by putting a quadratic term of this variable into that. I have done that here with the frequency of interaction. You see that the frequency of interaction squared minus means that it's an inversely U-shaped relationship, and this hypothesis actually is proven with that. When we look at the level of disagreement, it's actually a positive squared relation, and that means that's not inversely U-shaped, that's U-shaped. And you see the other results. This stars behind always say you in tables whether it is significant. That means that is very unlikely that you would normally find it. That means that deviates from your null hypothesis, that there is no effect, there is frequency of communication does not have an effect on creativity or disagreement, that what you find deviates so much from what you should find, then something is significant. So likelihood determines the significance here. So what we see is, yes, frequency of interaction is inversely U-shaped related to team creativity, and that the level of disagreement is actually has a negative relationship with team creativity, since the level of disagreement squared is positive but not significant. Also negative to creativity is here the team tenure, which has a negative sign. So that you find back in many research articles, and what you have to learn to read that simple statistical numbers and to understand what is happening here. And today that was an example on linearity and non-linearity and how you might test that. You find that back in some literature. When you want to have a chart, you read the book chapter published this year. Thanks a lot.